Okay, can you guys hear me? Awesome. Apurva, I was thinking of introducing you, but then I thought maybe I'll just ask the audience to see if they know you. How many of you have used Instacart in the past? Okay, there's some people that were born after COVID, so they haven't tried Instacart yet, but they'll get to it.
Meet me after for a coupon code.
Do you still get coupon codes after you left? Yeah?
Would you like some too?
Yeah, I would love that. I'm a cheap Indian, so I'm always looking for deals. Awesome. So let's get started. You need no introduction, so I'm going to cut right to the chase. Instacart was your 21st company. Did I hear you had 20 failed startups before you started Instacart? You have Indian immigrant parents like I do. You went to Waterloo Engineering like I did. Did your parents not call you at any point and be like, son, we love you, but you need to get a job at Google? Like, what is wrong with you? We did not come to this country so you can have failed startup one after the other. Tell me more about what kind of kept you going. How did you end up starting Instacart?
You know, you'd be surprised that still happens, by the way. I believe that perseverance is the most important quality in a founder. And that means that you have to go from a setback to another setback without losing motivation, without losing the optimism that the next one is going to be the one that works. And while, on the one hand, you can say that those 20 different companies that failed were failures, and they were, but I learned a lot. Right? I learned how to move much faster. I learned how to raise money. I learned how to pick better ideas, and that led me to Instacart. And so, I think that not all failure is catastrophic, and you got to keep going.
Did you ever doubt yourself in any of those companies that maybe I'm not cut out for this, or did you just have this maniacal belief that you're going to make it happen?
I think it just comes back to the perseverance. I mean, I remember, look, like I don't want to sugarcoat it. It really sucked. It really sucked to go from one failure to another. And what ends up happening when you come up with a new idea, right? And you feel like that's going to be the one. You have to get emotionally invested in that idea, right? You have to get emotionally invested so that you can really not only convince yourself, but you can sell others to join that idea. And of course, you do that, and then you realize that, in fact, for a multitude of reasons, it wasn't a good idea. It sucks, right? There's no way to sugarcoat it. But the reality is that, you see all these founders, and you see outside looking in, there's just like, you see them as these success stories. But every single day, they're going through so much failure. Every single day, they're going through, so many setbacks. And, persevering through that is, in my opinion, what makes a great founder.
Instacart started at a time when delivery startups were failing left, right, and center, right? There were a lot of them. Uber for X was very much a thing, but most of them were not working out, unit economics, so on and so forth. When you described the concept of Instacart to your friends, did they ever respond with, Instacart, so like web van, but not... How did you have confidence that this will work? Like, did you ever doubt yourself? How did you test the hypothesis? How did you know this was it?
I think this goes back to the last question. For me, Instacart was never a hypothesis. It was not an experiment. It was going to work. It was just a matter of how. And we were just going to figure out how we're going to make it work. And yes, of course, there's a lot of people pushing back on us and saying, why isn't this another web van? And web van, for those of you who don't remember this, it was like this multi-billion-dollar, one of the biggest .com, failures. And so of course, that was the biggest question on Instacart. For the first 5-6 years in the Instacart journey, that was the question. And I remember going to a VC meeting, and midway to the VC meeting, right? The VC just, walks out of the conference room, right? I was like, did
I miss something?
And then he comes back in a couple of minutes, right? And then he slams this floppy disk, right, on the conference room, and he's like, "You should go home and study this. This is the web van business plan." And I'm like, I don't know what to do with this. Like, I don't have a floppy drive. Anyway, but instead of sort of like, running away from that, right, we addressed the elephant in the room. Our slide deck changed. Immediately, the first slide said, Webvan done right. And so instead of people sort of bringing up that obvious question, we're like, okay, let's go, right? And the thing is that, if you look at like, some of the biggest ideas in the world, it's not like they're new, right? The big ideas are always things that humanity has been working on, right? And so, of course, grocery delivery is not a new idea, right? But a lot in the world has changed, and there's a lot to learn from Webvan's failures. Number one, they couldn't figure out how to scale across the country and across the world economically, all right? Number two, they couldn't figure out their unit economics because they had to have all these people and all this inventory and warehouses and trucks that they had to buy. And so we would start saying, well, look, like, things have changed as a result of the fact that smartphones are now so prevalent. Now, if you want to order your groceries, we can connect you with someone who is already close to a grocery store who could pick and deliver those groceries to you. We're not holding inventory, we do not have warehouses, and we're not buying any trucks. And so that means that it takes us, a couple of weeks, less than a couple of weeks to launch a new market. And it takes us, at least at that time it was projected, a few months to get to profitability. And so things were very different, and we just had to communicate that. Now, did that mean that the world recognized that? No. Instacart, if you had polled people over the first 5 years, right, people outside the company, if Instacart was going to be a company that's going to exist, the answer is no. It took a lot of work from the team to make the company inevitable. And, in fact, like most seed stage companies, that's what you're working on, is making the company inevitable.
You mentioned funding. Let's talk about some of the early rounds of funding. What was the experience like? Tell us about some of the rejections you got. Any interesting stories from that experience?
Lots. I mean, we can focus on that session, the whole time. We'll talk about YC. I know this is a pre-seed conference, and so I applied like very late to YC, like disturbingly late. The batch was already in progress, and so I tried to apply, and they told me you can't apply, and so I got a few of my friends to introduce me to YC partners, which they did, and then unfortunately one after another they all sort of said no, it's too late, until this one guy, Gary Tan, he saw what we're doing, and he was like, look, you can probably apply late, and if I had to guess, it's not gonna happen, but like you can apply late. That's what he said, right? The way I took at it is that I think you have a chance, right? And so I applied late. Next day, got rejected. And I was like, I really don't even think that they actually understand what the product does, right? And why it's different, and why, we're gonna win. And so I opened up the Instacart app and placed an order for a 6-pack of beer and addressed it to Gary Tan. 30 minutes later, I get a call. I thought it was gonna be like, hey, thank you for that beer, right? No. It was, what is this? And I told him, this is Instacart. He invited us to interview the next day, and Instacart was part of YC right after.
And one of the best investments I've ever made. As my wife always reminds me, no is a yes in the making, and it sounds like that is your belief in life, and it worked.
We got lucky. Yeah.
In the early days, I heard you did some of the deliveries yourself, right? Talk about the Paul Graham, do things that don't scale. Any interesting stories from that? What was that like? You're an engineer, worked at Amazon before, doing grocery deliveries. What was that experience? What did that teach you?
I mean, so much. I mean, of course, I'm sure all of you guys do this anyway, but like, you got to be very close to the customer. You have to understand their pain points better than anyone else does. That is, at the end of the day, why, a company wins over its competitors. In the early days of Instacart, people would just be placing their orders on the service, right? Thinking this was like a legitimate operation. But behind the scenes, it was like a one-man show, right? The person who was writing the code for that was the same person who was delivering their groceries. And if they called, it would go to my phone
So funny.
as well. And so, the only problem was that I didn't have a car. And the thing is that, this is back in the day when there was no, Uber X, right? There's only the Uber limo service, right, at the time. And so, a lot of times when people would order, like, they would see their groceries arrive in the luxury of a limo, right? And at the same time, it was an incredible learning experience.
That's amazing. Do you remember what's the weirdest thing somebody ordered in the early days of Instacart?
So many weird things. You get to really know people,
Whether you like it or not.
There was this. I got a call one day, right? It's one of my shoppers in Palo Alto, and she's like, "Hey, I don't know if I can do this. I think I'm gonna quit." I'm like, "What? Like, what happened?" Right? And turned out that she had just got an order for 200 bottles of those 2-liter bottles of soda, right? And she's like, I don't even know where I can find these, right? Let alone, like, where am I gonna fit this, right? I don't think this thing's for me, right? And I'm like, all right, hold on. Just pick me up from the Caltrain station. And I didn't have a car, so, like, and we're gonna do this order together, right? So we did, and we had to, like, clear out, like, 3 safe ways to do this, right? And there was like these soda bottles were everywhere. Like the trunk was filled, the back seat was filled, the front seat was filled, right? And the order was at Y Combinator because they started using Instacart, of course, right? And we show up there, we lug out all the bottles of soda, right? And the office manager is there, is like after that, is like, oh my God, thank you so much. That was so easy. I'm gonna do this every week. So you just had so many incredible stories. You get to really know people,
Oh my
God. It was awesome.
Yeah, you're like, it was easy, of course. Super easy. Keep ordering. So you started with an idea. The company's worth over $10 billion today, but it wasn't always up and to the right. June 2017, Amazon announces they're acquiring Whole Foods. For a lot of us Instacart customers, Whole Foods was the reason we were on Instacart. Tell us when you heard that news. What went through your head? How did you pull through?
Yeah, so I like to pride myself, I guess, in being a little bit of a paranoid person. When I found out about that news that day, I'll be honest, like, that was a gut punch. That was not on my 2017 bingo list that Amazon is going to buy Whole Foods for $17 billion. Right? This is not something I had expected. And to give you the sort of the significance of that and why that mattered that much, it was because Whole Foods was, not just the most important partner, kind of the only partner we had, right? I think about like 30 to 50% of our sales came from Whole Foods. And so this was just like, nuclear Armageddon. Like, this was that, like, really big deal. Like, I would get just so many text messages from people saying, hey, thinking of you. Right? It's just like, that's not what you want to hear, right? And so I was like, okay. I heard the news in the morning. I told the team that we're going to do an emergency all hands, and we did. And there, I told everyone that we are entering wartime. And the way we're going to be working for the next 12 months is going to be at a different pace, at a different level of focus than we have ever done in our entire lives. And that, of course, I just had a couple hours to think about the plan, but we don't have a plan yet, but we will in a couple of weeks. And in a couple of weeks, we laid out the plan, which was our focus was going to be on two things and nothing else. Everything else in the roadmap, put aside. That was number one, to sign every major grocer in North America. And number two, to retain people who had used us for Instacart, and retain customers who had used us for Whole Foods, to stay on our platform. And our team got to work. I mean, I've never seen our team work this hard, this focused. That meant that, if there was any retailer, regardless of where it was, we would go see them almost immediately. We took away any reason they had not to partner with Instacart, whether it was building features that allowed us to launch, tiny markets that, wouldn't have made sense earlier, whether that was launching Instacart Enterprise, whether it was launching 500 different other features. Our team made all of those things happen. And, not 1 year, but 9 months later, we had signed every major grocer. And by the time Whole Foods left the Instacart platform, they were 1.5% of our sales. So from 30% to 1.5% of our sales. And that was because we launched all these wonderful retailers where people really wanted to shop. And, I guess if you continue that story today, because of the team's execution during those days and of course after, Amazon grocery is a small fraction of the Instacart grocery sales at this point. And that was really because of what at the time felt like a gut punch, but it allows us to execute at a pace that we'd never seen before.
As they say, never waste a good crisis. And it sounds like you did not let that one go. Was that a culture building moment? Do you feel Instacart was a stronger company almost because it happened?
Definitely, never waste a crisis. And it's so hard as a leader. It's so difficult to manufacture the external propaganda, that we had in moments like that, where everyone knew, if you were working on anything else, it didn't matter, right? That level of focus, that level of clarity, it's so incredibly hard to buy. And it allowed us to accelerate what we wanted to do. It allowed us to get the most out of our teams in a way that was not possible before. And today, if you talk to anyone at Instacart or who was there at the time, I guarantee you that was probably one of their highlights in their entire work history. So it's really incredible.
So you get past this crisis in 2017, 2018, and then March 2020 happens, right? None of us predicted that to happen. We're at peak lockdowns, and suddenly everybody is getting their groceries through Instacart that wasn't on Instacart before. I got calls from my parents saying, we just signed up for Instacart and we got a grocery order. These are not the most tech-savvy people. They were not on Instacart before. You probably saw an incredible surge on demand. How did you keep the wheels on?
Yeah, it was probably one of the most important sort of times in the company's history. So this was, at the beginning of January 2020, I think we were doing about $7 to $8 billion in annualized sales, right? So not a small company, but not that large either. We were all seeing the news, what was happening in China, and it just didn't make sense to any of us. They're like, okay, why would this only stay in China? This has gotta come to the United States as well. And then we saw our order volume. We're like, interesting. It just grew by 10% week over week. And so just put that in perspective. That's we just added $700 million in ARR, right, in a week. Okay, not seasonal, but I don't think anyone, was they're like, hey, this is pretty good. And then the second week happens. And guess what? The same thing happens. And we're like, okay, so we just added 770, million in ARR. Like, all right. And I remember, right, like at this point, of course there was like, there we're growing and we're like basically meeting our 6-month goals in a matter of weeks, right? But at the same time, there's this nervousness because it also meant that, all of our infrastructure, which was designed for, to keep up for like, 70 to 100% year-on-year growth, right? We were seeing that amount of growth within a matter of weeks. And we're like, okay, well, we're gonna need more servers. We're gonna need, everything to be, redone if we wanted to keep up this growth. And we were having this discussion internally when, boom, lockdown. And so at this point, everyone and their grandma was using Instacart, right? 10% week-over-week growth. I mean, forget about that. Like, that was that was easy. People were waking up. We were getting these anecdotes, right? And we were seeing this in our data, where people would wake up at 4 a.m. because they wanted a delivery slot, right? And it would get filled so fast that people wanted to wake up at 4 a.m. to place an order. People would, email anyone they knew at Instacart to say, hey, my grandma's really sick. She needs the grocery order. And so, on the one hand, this is a team that is navigating, keeping their families safe and navigating how to like work from home, from their kitchen tables, right? On the other hand, this became now, not about growth, but it was about like, okay, well, we have this incredible responsibility for our communities. And so at this point, we called a wartime. And literally everything else the company was working, the whole roadmap was shelved. Because the only thing that mattered during this time was that we were there for our communities. And so, over a matter of weeks and months, we onboarded 500,000 shoppers. That's like, close to the population of like San Francisco. Yeah. We onboarded them so they started to pick and deliver groceries so that, when someone's grandma ordered at 4 a.m., they had availability. We made sure that this was done safely. So we created a completely new supply chain so that we had enough PPE so that we're able to make sure that our shoppers were staying safe during this time. We worked with our retailers so that our shoppers were able to get into the stores at a time when, other customers weren't there. And as a result of this, what started at the 7 to 8 billion in sales ended at about 25 billion in sales that year. And to put that in perspective, that was also around the time when Amazon Prime and Target and a bunch of other companies completely shut down. They couldn't handle it. And so this was an incredible time. This was a crucial moment for the company, and our team stepped up and delivered.
So the text messages from your friends went from thinking of you to I need you in 3 years. And it's a reminder that it's not always up and to the right, and even when you're doing well, there's going to be ups and downs. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about team building, because that is a big thing that a lot of our founders here spend time on. In the early days, talk about what you looked for in talent, learnings from what worked, what didn't work. How did that change over time? And one of the questions from the audience was around these crisis moments. How did you keep the team motivated, right? Did you have attrition on the team? How do you keep the head high, and how do you get people to power through that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of questions, but let's talk about, I think, team, just on an abstract sense first. There is just this, I think there's this power law that exists with team members, where there's people that you meet that are just like going to be, like good, and they're going to do good work, but there's people that you meet and that have a chance individually to change the trajectory of the company, right? And there's just very few people like that. Very few, right? And for those people, you should do everything in your power to convince them to do whatever it's possible to bring them in to the organization. Because, those people are the reason why we were able to navigate the Amazon Whole Foods crisis, the COVID crisis, and so many others that people don't even know about. It really is about those individuals. And so, and in terms of attrition, believe it or not, during any of those times, Amazon Whole Foods and COVID, we had, I don't know the exact numbers, but I think in terms of all the key people in the company, 0 people left.
Wow.
0. It was not oh my God, we're losing some key people. No, there was no one left. And the reason why is because, these are people who you trust to go to battle with you, and they appreciate that. You ask for them for help during those times, and they're there. So I'm just a big believer in that, and I think that at the end of the day, that's what differentiates great companies from others.
But say more, what did you look for in the early days, especially in terms of talent? Because I think you brought in a couple of co-founders, late co-founders to the team. What made you feel comfortable to give them that title, to bring them into the team? And any advice you would have for folks that are looking to build a team in the early days? What is the right talent, and perhaps what's not the right fit for that stage?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that judging talent is a surprisingly hard thing, and it takes a lot of time, a lot of interviews, and a lot of failure to build that intuition that allows you to know after maybe 60 minutes of a conversation that there could be something interesting in this person. And so, yes, there were some wonderful people that we brought on, and in many cases we got lucky as well. But it took me some time. It took me some time to understand what great looks like and how to evaluate great quickly. I think that as a tactic to figure out how do I know? How do I interview someone and very quickly understand if they are the right fit for what we're doing or not? One of the things I did was I created this 20-point checklist, and not 5, but 20. And this was it wasn't for the whole company, it was just for me, right? So that I would evaluate people on that 20-point checklist. And I would just keep score over time to understand, which axis did people miss on that I hired and, didn't work out, or they did work out. And so it was that continuous improvement mentality on hiring and on talent that you just have to have. You're not going to be excellent at talent on day one. It's going to take time, just like anything else.
Well, let's unpack this a little bit, the checklist. That's really interesting. Do you remember what were some of the top drivers on that checklist that you found over time to be the most correlated to success?
Yeah, I mean, that's for me. I mean, it's not the case with everyone, right? And so everyone has their own style, their own chemistry, their own values. And so the things that I value, there's of course all that, there's obviously sense of urgency, agency, and things like that. They're more standard that you look for. But the things that I guess were uniquely some things that I was looking for were, number one, are they a structured thinker? Right? Like when you give them a problem, do they break it down into say, okay, well, these are the 3 key components. This is how I would solve it. Right? That's something I just care about. I just want that in people that I work with because, grocery delivery is a very hard problem. You have to just break it into pieces and then you can tackle it. That was one. Another one, for example, was, this is just very difficult, but it's something that's very important to me. Like, how much do they want to win, right? Like, there are people who are just fine with doing a job, right? But do the people that I want to bring on, do they want to win? How much do they desire every day to win, right? And you can see that in people, and that's what I cared about.
Fascinating. And were there cases where perhaps you hired somebody that wasn't a fit? What did you do in those instances?
Lots. Lots. I mean, it was not because those people weren't great. They were great, but it's just not the right fit for us. And I think, I think Vinod Khosla has this thing where he's like, look, you're going to get lucky if you get 30% right. And I think, I didn't know that then, but I think he's absolutely right. It takes time to build your intuition to say, okay, if you, what is your batting average going to be? But initially, yeah, it was terrible, 30% batting average. And I think probably now I can probably do 70, but it's not perfect. And it's not perfect not because of that individual or because of your intuition. It's just also a dynamic environment, right? The company that you've started interviewing in is a different company by the time they join, and then you put them in an environment where, hey, it's a different company every 6 months. So it's like the pattern recognition is tough, right? And so I think that it's not a static problem, and so you're gonna have when it's a moving target, you're gonna have mistakes.
I think being comfortable with that level of uncertainty is one of the characteristics we see in successful founders, right? Just being comfortable that you'll never have the perfect answer, not everything will go well, whether it's pre-product market fit, post-product market fit, post-IPO, whatever the case might be. I think you just have to be comfortable with that volatility. There's an interesting question from the audience I want to ask you. Is Instacart exactly how you imagined it? And how has that evolved over time, and how have you taken feedback to apply to the idea?
That's a good question. So is it exactly how I imagined it? To be honest, my imagination, the company was $1 trillion company. So, there's maybe a couple zeros.
Couple more years.
Yeah, they're remaining still. But, in a lot of ways, it was exactly the way we imagined it, which was, when you're starting an idea, right, it's a complete blank slate. There's nothing, right? So when you're like, okay, well, how, when I open up the app, am I going to see a warehouse that I can order from? Or is it going to be, all the local stores, right? So we made certain decisions in terms of, okay, we're going to partner with local stores. We're going to work with advertisers who have products in those stores. And we're going to have, crowdsource people to pick and deliver groceries, right? And we're going to do this in every market around, anywhere, right? So a lot of those things are true. Those are exactly right. Now, this is, when you're building a company, your imagination does not stop, right? It's not like, okay, your product market fit, hey, that's the imagination, that's how it's going to go. No, it just continues. And just, you want to keep imagining it. And so I'd say in the early ideation phase to where the company is today, I think that it's been pretty dead on.
Amazing. You've achieved what a lot of founders aspire for, taking a company public, worth over $10 billion and growing. What is something that no one tells you about success at this level?
It never stops. Your desire to continue to win. You want to, keep going. You want to do something bigger. And I don't think I ever thought about okay, would I want to do something? No, but it just never stops. You want to always do something bigger.
You just love the game.
Yeah.
Right? It's not about any one milestone. It's the journey that matters more. I think this is another thing we see in founders, successful founders, is that there is no end state. And if the company exits or they sell and they move on, they want to start again, right? They just want to keep doing it, even though it's, as a lot of you know, painful to build companies. It's highly risky, but they just can't see themselves doing anything else. What do you want to do next?
Build something bigger.
Sucker for punishment. I'm going to do a rapid fire. We got a few minutes left. If you had to pick one, timing, talent, or pure hustle, what mattered most in the early days of Instacart?
I mean, hustle. It was all hustle. Hustle allows you to make it the right time. Hustle allows you to make sure that you have the right talent. And so it was all hustle.
Amazing. Biggest pinch me moment at Instacart?
there was this moment during COVID where, we were just like trying to keep our servers up and just make sure that we were, around for another day. When one of our shoppers sent a photo and it ended up in our Slack room, right? And it was a photo of some house's main entrance, where there was someone had put a blackboard there, and it was like clearly like kids just drawing with some chalk, right? And they're just saying, thank you Instacart, thank you Instacart for keeping us fed and healthy, and that was just such a galvanizing moment for the whole company, because it was just like people were working 18-hour days for for weeks, keeping the site up and running, and it was just like, this is why we were doing it. So it was just incredible to see that.
This is from the audience. When will you add Trader Joe's to Instacart? And the person said the people are waiting.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Funny story. In the early days of Instacart, right, there was these grocers had no reason to trust us, right? And we were lucky if the store manager would even return our call, right? But it was clear that people wanted new stores on our site, but there's no way of getting the catalog information, right? There's no way to know what the store sells, let alone what's in stock, right? And so we decided, when we walked into a Trader Joe's, and with an army, we brought about 30 people with us, and we bought one of every single item at the store. We took it to a studio, took photos of every single one of those items, and the next day, Instacart had Trader Joe's, and we doubled overnight. And obviously we ate really well for a few weeks after that, because we had all this leftover. But unfortunately, the decision of Trader Joe's on Instacart is not a decision that is on Instacart. That is that's Mr. Joe's decision, and we hope they are open-minded about the possibility.
I'm just picturing the cashier who rang you.
Oh, they loved us.
They thought it was the weirdest order ever. Why do you need everything but only one? One tomato, one avocado, but you also need diapers and toilet paper at the same.
Let me tell you that after that incident, the store manager always returned our call.
Fair enough. Who's a founder you admire the most?
I mean, there's just so many incredible founders in our time. This is going to be obviously sadly a cliched answer, but look, I think Elon Musk is the one of the best founders of not just our time, but of all time. And I think it's so crazy to be a contemporary of someone like him.
Yeah, that's right. One piece of advice you ignored, you wish you hadn't.
Talent is more important than anything else.
Favorite thing to order on Instacart?
I order everything on Instacart, everything. So I don't know what to tell you. Bananas,
Speaking of Instacart, if your startup life, this is a final question. If your startup life was a grocery item, what would it be?
I was prepared for this question. And I was also eating this, when I was thinking about this question. So I think it's reasonable. It's a salted pistachio.
Okay.
And it's because it's you got to crack that nut, right? It's hard to crack that nut sometimes, right? But it's delicious and it's very addictive. All right. And so I don't know. Somehow those dots connect.
Interesting. Love it. Well, with that, I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Awesome.
So thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks so much.